So this is not how we pictured tonight's service. Those of you who join us regularly, or if you've been listening to us as the service has gone on, you know that on Erev Shavuot, we anticipate this joyous moment when our teens confirm their identity as Jews and their devotion to Jewish living through our confirmation ceremony. It's a hundreds-year-old tradition at Central. So this makes tonight all the more unprecedented. As I said at the beginning, don't fret. Our intention is to celebrate our confirmands in the winter, when we can hopefully be together in our sanctuary. But it doesn't change the fact that this moment is jarringly different from what it's been for hundreds of years. On the night we relive the giving of Torah, though, we should remind ourselves our tradition has the tools that we need to address this moment in time. So for tonight, I would invite us to look at a Talmudic story. We can travel back to sometime shortly after the year 70 CE. It was a terrifying and a terrible moment. The structures of society were torn down when the great temple in Jerusalem that Rabbi Rosenthal just mentioned, when that great temple was destroyed. The Jewish world was shattered and shaken to a degree that is hard for us to fathom today. And behind that backdrop, there is a story of four great rabbis, great teachers, Rabbi Joshua, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, which is a mouthful, and Rabbi Akiva. The four of them, arguably some of the most important Jewish leaders of the time, were traveling together on their way to Jerusalem. Jerusalem had been devastated by the Roman army, which had brutally crushed the rebellion. The four rabbis reached the Temple Mount and walked through the rubble and the destruction that remained of what had once been the great focal point of Judaism. When out of the central chamber of the ancient temple, the place where God once dwelled, the Holy of Holies, out of the ruins of that small room, a fox scrambled out. Three of the sages began to cry. Yet Rabbi Akiva began to laugh with joy. They asked Akiva, "Why are you laughing?" And he looked at their tears and asked, "Why are you crying?" "We're crying," they said, "because a place that was once so holy, only God and the high priest were allowed to enter it, is now the home of foxes and wild beasts and any manner of creepy crawling thing." "I am laughing," said Akiva, "because there's a prophecy that states that the temple would be destroyed, but it's linked to another prophecy," he said, "which tells us that even though a destruction will come, one day Jerusalem will yet again be at peace and a center of Jewish life. Yes, we're living in a terrible moment, but it will give way to a better time." Rabbi Akiva's message is important today, as important perhaps as it was 1,000 years ago. During days of uncertainty, it's easy to despair. Today we should grieve over what's been lost and what we may still lose. In the past few months, there's been a staggering loss of life, loss of financial security, loss of the comfort of friends and family, loss of freedom of movement, loss of moments that we picture differently. Graduations, weddings, tonight confirmation. But like Akiva, we must learn to smile over the promise that there will come another day. It will perhaps be different from the world that we knew, but that may actually be the point. Akiva's smile and his laughter came not because he pined for what was, but because of the promise of what could be. After all, there was a lot of things that were wrong with Jerusalem before the Romans destroyed it. The priesthood was corrupt. The great temple was run by Rome and its lackeys. The political leadership cared only for itself. Poverty was widespread, and Jewish factions were at war with one another. Yes, the fact that Jerusalem was destroyed needed to be mourned, But Akiva didn't want to rebuild Jerusalem as it had been. If they needed to rebuild it because it had been destroyed, then they should rebuild a Jerusalem that was better than the one that had been lost. And picturing that new Jerusalem, Akiva smiled. And we must do the same. We must ask ourselves how we can take the malfunctions of our society that have been laid bare in recent months and repair them. Whether it's the systemic inequalities tied to race and income, the striking failures of our healthcare system, the disparity within our educational system, or the dysfunction in our political system. It's okay to mourn. There is so much that we've lost. But let's not lose sight of what we will need to rebuild and how much was broken already if we choose to look closely. The prophecy that gave Akiva hope is one that gives me hope now. It's a prophecy from the book of Zechariah. He tells us, the prophet, that there will come once again a time when, and I'll quote his prophecy directly, a time when old men and women will gather freely in the squares of the city, each with a staff in hand because of their great age. And those same squares will be crowded with boys and girls playing and laughing and dancing. It may seem impossible to us now, but it is not impossible, the prophet said. May that vision arrive swiftly when we once again flood the squares of our city, old and young alike. May we see that vision in our day and our time realized. May our society be rebuilt stronger and more moral than it was and it currently is. And may we allow ourselves to smile as we picture and pine for that day, even as we know it's going to be up to us to realize that vision.